All right, guys, Wednesday the 17th of November 2021. Welcome back to the garage. Chef Tush coming at you. We are just about to start part 2 on the 1981 Alfa Romeo Spider Veloce project, winter project list. And I think we're going to tackle number 4, the next item on the list, which are wheel bearings. So we're going to take a look at the front wheel bearings. As I mentioned in a previous video, when I was jacking this car up to put it on stands, I could feel a little bit of play in the wheel bearings, particularly on the driver's side. So this is the worst of the two sides. So we're going to have a look at the driver's side first, then we'll tackle the passenger side. We'll see what the bearings look like on this side first. So wheel off, and we're all right under the front driver's side of the Alfa, and we're about to do another comparison, Alfa versus TR. And I'm not enjoying the process to get the caliper off so far on the front driver's side here. So there is a bracket here that holds the brake line, and that bracket, I've got the bottom nut off, as you can probably see there, but there's a small top nut on, you can probably see through there. Trying to get that top nut off to remove the bracket so I can actually take the caliper off and just hang it out of the way. The only problem is that nut just spins, I can't get a wrench or anything behind it, so unfortunately I can't remove the bracket to remove the line or to free the line. So that means I've had to remove the brake line from the back of the bracket, which is now going to necessitate me bleeding the brakes. I was going to do that anyway, but this was a little bit premature. So we've got the brake fluid draining out here. You can see how dark that is. It needed to be changed badly. Regardless of that, I'd like to be able to take the caliper off without having to actually remove any brake lines, but that's not the case on this car, unfortunately. All right, now that we've got that line detached, we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove the 2 bolts holding the caliper on, and we'll just remove the caliper completely. I think they're 19 mil bolts, but that's just off the top of my head. So we'll check that in a second. All right, the caliper is off, and they are indeed 19 millimeter bolts to get those off, 2 of them. So brake pads are looking good. They're pretty thick. I did have a look at these last time I was working on the car, and I actually did lube the pins. You can probably see the purple grease there. So these are in pretty good shape. They're a little dirty, so we'll probably scrub them up before we put them back on there. But other than that, they're in good shape. So let's move on to removing the actual hub, and we'll have a look at the bearings. All right, as far as getting the cap off the end of the axle, the Alfa wins. It's much easier to get the Alfa cap off than it is the Triumph cap. This has got a little bit of a ridge. You can just use a screwdriver to bang it off. So Alfa win there. Now, quick discussion on the nuts here that are holding on the hub. So reverse thread. So this is a reverse thread on the driver's side. So when you think you're loosening it, you're actually tightening it. So we're going to go the opposite way that we're accustomed to. Just a quick note on the lug nuts as well. My understanding is that prior to 1972, I believe the lug nuts were also left-hand thread for the left-hand side of the car. You might correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. Fortunately, these lug nuts operate as they are, well, I'm not going to say operate as they should, but operate as they normally would as far as I'm concerned. But this nut here, again, reverse thread, so we're going to make sure that we take it off the right way. All right, guys, we have the front driver's side rotor and hub off the car. Here's the end cap. Here's the cotter pin that holds the, I'm going to call this a castle nut. Don't know what the Italian is, castle nut. I believe they call this a thrust washer. For Triumph terms, we'd call it a D-washer. And there's the outer bearing. Unfortunately, we've got a stuck inner bearing on the stub axle. So we're going to have to try to come up with something to get that off. We may destroy it in the process, which is not necessarily a bad thing. We can always get a new bearing, but I think I'm going to have limited success getting that off. Let me just grab a light here. So that is stuck on there, and you can see the oil seal in behind there, or the grease seal in behind. So anyway, we'll get it off one way or another. It's going to be a bit more of a challenge. My understanding is that often the actual hubs themselves get stuck on, and you can use like a 3-jaw puller to get them off. But in this case, the hub came off, but it pulled the inner bearing and the grease seal off from the inside of the hub. So those are stuck on here on the stub axle. All right, guys, unfortunately, we're going to have to get a little bit destructive here. We've already broken the outer cage off the bearing, and you can see the race is still stuck here to the stub axle. So I've got my little Dremel out with a good Dremel cutting disc on there, a thin disc, and we're just going to cut a slot. Actually, we're going to cut across in the top of this bearing, and then we're going to get a cold chisel and try to break the bearing off there. Obviously the importance here is not to go too deep and scar the stub axle. That would be bad. So we're just going to be careful of that, and we'll see how we do. I'm not going to film it, but I'll bring you back once we get the
all right, we've got our cross cut in there, so we're just going to get our cold chisel out with a hammer, and we're going to try to break this race off there without doing any damage. All right, guys, we managed to get it off without any damage to the stub axle. There's the remaining inner, and you can just see how it's sort of cracked. You can probably see the line there just on the inside where it's cracked and released the pressure on the stub axle. So we're happy to get that off. So we'll grab the oil seal off of here, and then obviously we've got to wait for a new bearing and races to come so we can reinstall this. But that's half the battle, getting these off. So good to go. We'll work on the next side, and hopefully that one will come off a little bit easier. I suspect the passenger side will be a little bit easier. That's why I started with this side first. All right, guys, flashback to the other side when I said these hubs and rotors can sometimes be stuck to the actual stub axle themselves. So this, in this case, this is stuck. We've got the front bearing out, the D-washer off, and the nut off, obviously, but that is stuck solid. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab our, we've got a large 3-jaw puller, so we're going to do that, and we'll see if we can get that unstuck off the stub axle. All right, guys, here's the puller setup. I've got a 2-jaw puller just hooked on the back of the rotor, and we've got the nut on here just so it doesn't pop off, and for somewhere for the big rod to ride on. So we'll go ahead and we'll start increasing the tension, and hopefully this will pop off with no problem. All right, hub and rotor came off without any issues with the puller. However, we've got a stuck bearing on this stub axle as well. So we're going to do the same process. We'll destroy the bearing in the process, but we're going to put new bearings on anyway. So we're going to remove the cage, we'll cut the cross, we'll get the cold chisel, break that off, and remove the grease seal in behind. All right, guys, welcome back to the garage. It's now Thursday. Not sure where we left off yesterday, but I did manage to get the bearings off. This one was stuck, but we were able to get it off without cutting it, unlike the driver's side where we had to basically destroy it to get it off. Anyway, so new bearings and new oil seals are ordered, so we'll wait for those to come. So we've just got the components here standing by. I'm hitting the bleed screws with a little bit of penetrating oil for the next few days while these are here, because obviously these will need to be re-bled at some point. So I want to make sure that the bleed screws will move once we get these back on the car. So having said that, we need to find another project while we wait for those parts. And I think we're going to have a look at the trunk today, and we are going to remove the trunk carpeting in order to get to the reverse lights to see if those light bulbs might be broken. So there's a few fasteners here to undo, and we'll pull the carpet out. It's out of the way partially anyway, and we'll have a better look at the trunk bay, and I'll show you the condition that this trunk is in. It's in pretty darn good condition, like most of the rest of the car, or like the rest of the car. This trunk is in excellent condition. So let's pull the carpet out, and we'll have a quick look before we work on the lights, and then we probably have another little project we can do back here in the near future. And for those of you who don't know Alphas, the battery is actually located back here in the trunk. So here's the battery shelf back here, and then this little plastic cover goes off to sort of hide that once the carpet goes back in. So there's the battery location. One of the other curious things on this car, I don't believe the original toolkit had ever been out of this car. It gets stored back up under here, and it's a little bit dark for you to be able to see. But I don't believe this toolkit had ever been removed from the car, so we'll stick that back up on where it should be. It looks like the elastics have perished on the actual jack storage, so we'll probably get some zip ties or something to tie that back up just to make sure it doesn't rattle. I thought that was pretty cool. All right, guys, a quick look at the trunk area with the carpet removed, and as you can see, it's in excellent condition with not a spot of rust. Original liner back there, even the spare looks fantastic. Even the battery tray looks fantastic. So good to go back here. This is where the in-tank fuel pump is, right here. And we exchanged that when we first got the car. So fuel tank is under this area here. There's the filler neck, for example. We are going to be changing out all the hoses here in the trunk. We've got a kit to do that, and I'll share that with you in a little bit. But our task right now is to get to the lights, and you can see them here on the back with these knurled nuts. So we'll go ahead and we'll play around and see if we can find out if those lights are burnt out or whether we need to investigate further towards the front of the car. All right, all is good in the hood. Reverse lights now working as they should. Just had to clean up the sockets a little bit. Everything is good, working as they should. So we're just investigating the possibility of the future of upgrading the rear lights here to LEDs. So we're going to take a look. The flasher unit apparently is burnt out anyway, and I believe if you upgrade to LEDs, you also need to upgrade the flasher unit. So now would probably be a good time to do that. So we're going to do a little bit more investigation, see what kind of bulbs are in here now, and potentially upgrade in the future to LEDs for the rear lights. All right, guys, I'm just going to cover off a couple of things if you're working on an Alfa Romeo. Generally, my videos are not meant to be educational. They're kind of more what I'm doing, but I figure while I'm back here, if somebody's not changed the taillight bulbs, for example, in an Alfa Romeo before, they might be wanting to know how to do that. So there's a couple different things. If you're looking to replace the entire taillight housing, so you want to take the whole unit out of the car, the whole frame basically, you can undo these 4 fasteners here. There's 2 here, and there's 2 here on the inside. One there at the bottom, one at the top you probably can't see. So you remove those 4 fasteners and that will allow you to take the entire housing out. If you're just wanting to take the lens off, you have these long aluminum threaded things here that go through here, and they will actually attach to the rear studs on the light itself to hold the light in. Now, this is the section that has to be removed first. The outer section, so the lens for the reverse light and the lens for the signal light are actually held in by little tabs, and they are kept in by the red lens. So you need to remove this lens if you want to get to either of the outer lenses. So hopefully that makes sense. So if you're just changing your bulbs out, you really only need to do these 4 fasteners here. Okay? That's a quick lesson on the Alfa Romeo Spider. All right, guys, Friday afternoon. Welcome back to the Taj Mahal. Just about to embark on another project, and I thought I would turn the camera on. So we're back in the trunk, and we got a new kit back here. This is from a company called HPSI. I think I have their card here. So HPSI, High Performance Store, and there's their website down there. They do these kits for Alfa Romeos to replace all of the fuel lines, particularly in the trunk and for the Spica and a few other areas. And they come in these handy dandy kits. So we're just about to start looking at changing all the hosing back here on the interior of the trunk. So there you go. Those basically will be exchanged by this kit here. Now, as part of that, I thought, well, you know, I don't want to be doing all this work exchanging all the fuel lines in the trunk when the actual gas tank is a little bit suspect itself as far as having some sludge in it. I mean, this car sat for a long period of time, plus I haven't even started it in I think 3 years, so it's probably a good opportunity before I exchange all the lines, because basically all these lines have to come off of here anyway. So I figured it'd be a good time to take the tank out and clean that while I had all the lines off anyway. So we're going to go ahead and do that. It's not part of the project list, but I think it's a good opportunity to do it and to get that tank a little bit more clean for the next owner. So we'll go ahead and do that. I don't think it's going to be, and I might be jinxing myself here, I don't think it's going to be a hard process, but you never know. It's a bunch of bolts here to be released inside of the trunk, and these panels get removed, and then the trunk, or the gas tank, comes out through the trunk. I don't believe there are any lines attached to the bottom of the tank, because this has an electronic pump that I've already pulled, and that's the new pump that I installed the last time I was back here. I've already pulled the pump up, which obviously pulls fuel out the top, and then it goes through these lines here and down. So one of these will be the output. I think this larger line here is the output, and the smaller line in the back is the return line. So there are no lines actually on the bottom of the tank. We'll see if we can get the fill tank neck off the tank easily enough. But again, all the other lines are going to be exchanged anyway. So like I said, it'd be a good opportunity to go ahead and get this tank out and get it cleaned. All right, so that's what we're up to. We'll bring you along the way.
once I get some progress done. Okay, so they look to be 17mm bolts, and as you can see, they're all along here, all the way up there, a couple here, and the most difficult are going to be, there's a couple back down in here. I think you can probably just see them there. So I think we'll go after the difficult ones first. It looks like this inner plate needs to be removed first since it's overlapping the other plate. So we're obviously going to have to detach this hose, or a few hoses as mentioned. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that now. Alright, so we're just in the process of removing that panel, and I was wrong. It's actually spot welded together. It does look like it's joined there, but it's actually spot welded, so it's all one piece. So we're just lifting it up carefully, and we're maneuvering around to be able to get it out of the trunk. So far so good, all the lines detached okay. So we'll continue on. And of course your battery is fully disconnected. Alright, there's the bottom side of that plate, and surprisingly the foam is still in really good condition. 40 years old, original. Anyway, here's the top of the tank, and that looks to be in pretty good shape. So it looks like there's some fasteners around the outside, some Phillips fasteners that we need to undo, and then we should technically just be able to lift that tank out. Anyway, we'll give it a shot. There's a little bit of gas in the tank, so shouldn't be too heavy. I understand there's a bit of a sealant in here, so it can be stuck pretty good. So we'll probably have to break the bonds of the sealant. I can see a little bit here in the corner. So that might be a little bit of a challenge. But anyway, we'll give it a shot. Definitely smelling like old gas in here. Gonna have to open the garage door soon. Alright, we got the tank just coming up, and here's what we did. We just actually ended up putting a jack underneath the tank with a piece of 4x4 along length to spread the weight. And there's a couple of ribs on the bottom of the tank that we went across when we put the block under it, just for some added strength. So it's up. We didn't have to crank very hard before it popped up, so that's good. So we'll get it up and out the rest of the way. All right, we're making some progress, but we're going to have to remove the fuel filler bracket. There's 3 10mm little set screws that hold that on there. I've removed 2 on this side. There's 1 on this side. So we're going to remove that to be able to move the gas tank up a little bit higher. It just keeps fouling on that little metal piece there. And I think I need to get the tank up higher on that side to get some clearance on the right side. So we'll go ahead and remove that. Alright guys, the gas tank is out. It wasn't too bad. So it looks pretty darn good in there. Rubber bumpers are even still in good condition. So there is the exhaust there. Pretty close to the gas tank. A little bit surprised about that. But yeah, that looks great. The gas tank looks great, except for the inside could do with a little bit of a cleaning, as I'd mentioned. That's the whole reason, the whole purpose for taking it out. So we'll give the Radiator gas tank shop a call and see if we can get this in fairly short order and get it back so we can get it in the car. So anyway, that gives me good access to change out those hoses while the tank is not in there. So we can probably do that while the tank is out being cleaned. Alright, old school shop getting harder and harder to find. So I've dropped the tank off, and they are going to acid dip it, clean it, steam it, and they're going to coat it with an ethanol friendly coating. And they're going to do that for 225 Canadian, which I think is a pretty darn good price. Alright, back to the house. Guys, back out in the garage after some dinner, and we're going to deal with some more fluids. Obviously, having drained the gas tank, we're now looking at draining the radiator. And the reason why we want to drain the radiator is we want to replace the bottom radiator hose. So we've got a new one here from HPSI as well. The only problem is that radiator hose, if you've never changed one on an Alfa, it looks to be quite difficult, and there's not an awful lot of room to get hands in there. So I think we're going to have to make some room. The first thing that's going to have to come off is this overflow. So we're going to take this off first so we can get our hand down in there at least. Eventually we'll get around to draining the radiator. That's a fairly easy process, but this is going to be difficult. Anyway, we need some access in here to exchange some of the hoses below the overflow. So that'll be a good thing we need to do anyway for the future once we change all of these hoses in here. So we'll get to that eventually, but I think we'll work first on removing this overflow. Should be just a simple screw here to undo that will release this bracket, and then the bottle can come up with the attached hoses, and then we'll remove the hoses and remove the bottle entirely from the car. That is the plan. Wish me luck. All right, once again, big shout out to Wera Tools for being a sponsor of the channel. and providing me some cool tools to work with. I've never had a set of these. Those are flexible drivers for the hose clamps, and these are working a dream. I absolutely love them. Again, flexible shafts, so you can get into a bunch of different hard to reach places. It's going to work perfectly there on the bottle as well. So again, big shout out to Wera Tools for the hose clamp nut drivers. Alright guys, we've taken the bottle out, the overflow bottle, and it's freed up a little bit of space. Still not a lot of room in there. There is the Spica pump right there for the fuel injection, the mechanical fuel injection. We did remove the washer bottle here at the back, and we've got a little bit of space to work with down here. That blue canister down there is the in-engine bay fuel filter. That's already been changed out. So we're going to try to make a little bit more room. We'll probably remove this from its bracket. I think we've got a hose to exchange there for that, as well as a bunch of hoses down below, including some fuel hoses down there that are going into the Spica body themselves. So those are going to be fun. I can't remove the plenum. I don't want to remove the plenum. I'm sure I could if I wanted to, but that's the last thing I want to do. So we'll make as much room around it as we can to be able to get some access. I did notice one area here that needs some attention. There's a little relay here on the side of the coil. And if you see that wiring down at the bottom of that pinned connection, that is not looking so good. So we'll look to change that out, maybe repin the connector up into the relay. I'm not exactly sure what that does, but I'm sure it's important since it's coming directly out of the bottom of the coil. So we want to make sure that wiring is good to go. All right, so I think we're going to call it a night out here. I think the first thing we'll do tomorrow is we'll get under the car. We'll drain the radiator. We'll probably remove this top rad hose. I've just got it loosened off at the moment. We'll probably remove that tomorrow just again to get a little bit better access. And like I said, we'll remove a few more things under here, and we'll see what we can get to. All right, that is for tomorrow. Have a good night, guys. Thanks. Bye. Good Saturday morning. I'm under the front valence of the Alfa Romeo, and this oval hole here in the valence is where you can fit a socket up to remove the drain plug for the bottom of the radiator. So I'm hoping not to get a second shower this morning, and we'll do the best we can to stay dry. So I'll break out the ratchet and socket, and we'll go to town, drain that coolant, and replace that lower radiator hose. Wish me luck. Alright, so managed to stay pretty well dry. Coolant's looking good, so we'll move up to the top here once this is finished draining. Put the drain plug back in, change that lower rad hose. Alright, we removed the top radiator hose just to give a bit more access, and you can see the bottom hose that we're going after. So we'll go after that fastener first over there. We'll try to move the inside pipe before we remove the pipe that's attached to the bottom of the radiator itself. To get that clamp off, I'm sure we'll have to climb back underneath. I think the clamp is oriented towards the bottom of the car, so we'll get back under there and do that once we get this one undone. Wish me luck. This is proving to be quite the Saturday morning challenge. First of all, the clamp on the bottom was rusted on, so we had to break that off. Now I can't get the hose off because it's welded onto the bottom of the radiator tube. I've cut a slice in it with an X-Acto knife, and I'm trying to get my hand down there to get some leverage to get it off. Guess we're going to try to get another cut in it to see if we can get it to come off, but it is definitely fighting me. Well, the score this morning is Dave 1, Alpha none. Old hose is off. It was actually in pretty good shape, but may as well change it while we can. So we got a brand new, really nice silicone hose here from, again, HPSI. We've got new hose clamps to go with it as well. So we'll go ahead and we'll install that just with a little bit of soap and water over the fitting ends to make it slide on a little bit easier, and then we'll clamp it down and we'll call that good. Alright guys, that lower hose is installed and it fit beautifully actually. Very nice product, so that's going to last a very long time and won't need to be changed, which is a good thing because it's a little bit challenging as far as space is concerned down there. So I would have to give the win to the Triumphs on the lower radiator hose change. It's just a little bit easier than it is on the Alpha. So Triumph wins on that job. Alright guys, next project up is to start changing out some of the vacuum hoses, and we have a kit here from HPSI. So for the 71 to 81 Alpha. This also includes things like new hosing for the washer bottle and windscreen squirters. And I'm not sure whether I want to go ahead and change those out or not. The line actually is fairly hard, so we could probably actually do to change it out. My understanding is that this panel needs to be removed to access the hosing under there. A couple screws here and then a bunch of screws across the top here, and this panel should come out. So I'm thinking about doing that. It wasn't on the job list to do, but I have the hosing to do it, so I'm thinking about doing it. So I'll think about that a little bit more, whether I want to get that too far into it. I may actually see how easily this chrome strip comes off. If that comes off easily, I may then go ahead and try to remove this panel. But like I said, baby steps on that. And then the rest of the hosing in here, this is the air oil separator. There's a bunch of different hosing here that can be exchanged out, as well as all the hosing basically on the filter box, etc. Vacuum hoses for the brake booster. There's so many hoses on here that could potentially be changed out, so we have the entire kit to do that. So here's the vacuum hose kit, as I pointed out already, and here is the air oil separator hose kit, also from obviously HPSI. So we've got all the hosing to do that as well. So I think what we're going to start to do is we're going to start to exchange hoses out one by one, and we'll get this looking a little bit better. A lot of these hoses are actually in very good shape and don't need to be changed out, but they are 40 years old, so we'll do our best to change the ones that we can and follow the runs. There's a couple that run from this side of the car all the way over to the other side of the car, so those will be fun to sort of trace those out. But I've got an idea what needs to be changed. So let's get started. Again, I think we'll try to remove this chrome strip here first, and if that comes apart successfully, then we may get into this panel here and do those washer hoses. Alright, that chrome strip is off. Basically 2 screws, one on either side, and then it's got these little clips here that the molding fits under and pushes in tight. So we'll take the opportunity to clean up under here. This is just old dirt. It looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and remove these screws just inside the seal all the way across, and we'll see how easily this panel comes out. Alright, in order to get this piece off, so we've got all the fasteners undone, and they are just held on with screws and spire nuts. Look like that. Spire nut obviously down in the under the lip here of the engine bay. So now we're taking the windscreen wipers off in order to clear this. So this little cap here flips up. So pull the windshield wipers all the way up, flip the little cap up, then a 13mm bolt, and that'll allow you to release that from the splines. Then you can remove the rubber gaiter here, and we should be able to pull that off afterwards. I'm not sure how far we'll be able to pull it out, because obviously there's going to be hosing attached to the jets here, so we'll see how much slack there is in the hosing. And just like that, the panel is off. We now have access to the rear of the washer jets, and the T, and the line that runs to the washer bottle goes through a little hole here in the firewall. So that's looking pretty good. A little dirty, but pretty darn clean for 40 years. So we'll go ahead and we'll exchange this line out. Get the heat gun out just to soften the line to pull it off the T-fitting so we don't break anything. I think we have line for this as well, for the smaller one. We definitely have the line for the larger. I'm hoping we have line for the smaller one. We'll check that out. I'd like to switch it all out if we can, and then we'll give this panel a quick clean before we put it back into place. Hopefully it goes back into place as easy as it came out. Alright, the directions from HPSI, and again there's the website, say that I need to use size D of the tubing, so we'll pick out size D, and I'll probably have to cut it to length. They've actually given me a cigar cutter, and I'm assuming that's to cut the small hose, so that'll be a nice clean cut. So again, soap and water to slide these on the fittings so it doesn't tear, and I'll let you know how that goes. Alright guys, there's the new line installed, and we've got it running through the bulkhead. Just about to hook this up to this three-way. Here is the old line for reference, and it's pretty hard and pretty close to cracking. It's pretty crispy, so good thing we're changing this line out. It doesn't have much more longer to go. So there are the 3 pieces that we'd exchanged out. The 2 on the inside here, and the third obviously the one that runs through the bulkhead. So we'll go ahead and we'll attach that line up, again soap and water, and then we'll put the panel back in after we do a little bit of cleaning. All right guys, we're back to where we began. Everything is back in place and undamaged, thankfully. It took a couple of hours, believe it or not, just kind of working slowly. Those clips can be a little bit difficult to line up to get the bottom panel in and then to get the trim strip on top of that. So we're just taking our time, and we managed to get it done successfully. So I'm happy that's done. New lines under the cowl and in the engine bay for the washer bottle. So we're good to go there. We'll continue on with the vacuum lines in the engine bay tomorrow, and maybe even change out a couple of the fuel lines. Some of them we've changed out already on our previous work, but I see there's a couple more lines in here we can change out. Again, as mentioned, we'll change out the vacuum lines that we can. I've got Lynn coming tomorrow, and we're going to have a look at the fuel pumps to make sure that they're both operational. We know that the one in the trunk is brand new, but we're going to check the operation of the pump down below. Again, the car was running fine. We just want to make sure that everything is up to snuff and everything is pushing as it should. We do have a little bit of a dodgy wiring situation down here that I'm going to have Lynn take a look at, and we're going to fix that up as well. But other than that, I think we're in pretty good shape. So like I said, we'll continue on with some of the vacuum lines, fuel lines, etc. Check the fuel pumps tomorrow, and then we'll move on to something else. We'll keep going through those kits, and we'll put on as many hoses as we can. All right, guys, that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for subscribing. We'll see you tomorrow. Oh, before we go, we can update the list. So reverse lights are now done. The rad hose, the lower rad hose, is now done. Gas tank is coming back next Wednesday. We'll finish that up. And anything else? Wheel bearings we're waiting for. They should be here next week as well. So we'll continue on the list once we get some parts in.